On Mother's Day, I stood in my own living room holding a gift I never asked for, wrapped beautifully like a promise. Corbin and Jace watched me with these expectant grins that didn't feel loving at all. When I lifted the lid and pulled out the mug, I felt something cold settle in my stomach. World's most pointless woman. The words felt heavier than the ceramic. Their laughter filled the room, sharp and almost proud, like they'd pulled off the world's funniest joke. Jace even lifted his phone to record my reaction, waiting for me to laugh along so he wouldn't feel awkward. So I did. I forced a smile, even let out this hollow laugh that didn't sound like me at all. In that moment, I wasn't a wife or a mother. I was a prop in their little performance. My life with Corbin had been one long list of duties. I woke up early, made breakfast, kept track of Jace's schedule, managed Corbin's meetings, cleaned the house, handled bills, planned every holiday, organized every detail. Corbin always called himself the hard-working one, the provider, the man carrying the world on his shoulders. But without me quietly holding up the edges of our life, everything would have fallen apart. I knew it. He knew it. But acknowledging it would have meant treating me like a partner. And somewhere along the years, he decided I wasn't one anymore. I was just there. Convenient. Invisible. After the Mother's Day celebration, Corbin went to the couch, scrolling his phone like nothing meaningful had happened. Jace ran upstairs to edit the video he took, probably adding music or captions to make fun of me. I stood alone at the sink washing dishes from the breakfast I had cooked for myself. I watched the soap slide across the plates and felt this strange stillness inside me, a quiet kind of ache that didn't burn. It froze. My reflection in the dark window looked older than I remembered. Tired. Dull. A woman who had poured herself out for people who couldn't even see her. That was the moment something in me shifted. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was a simple, clear thought. I can't stay here anymore. The mug sat on the counter beside me, the words staring up at me like a verdict. But instead of believing them, I felt something rising in me I hadn't felt in years. A sense of self I had buried under laundry, schedules, and other people's needs. If they saw me as pointless, that was their blindness, not my truth. I dried my hands slowly, like I didn't want to break the moment. I took one last look at the house I had held together for so long. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done living as a shadow in my own life. The pointless woman they mocked that morning was gone. In her place was someone they had never met before. Someone who was ready to rebuild herself from the ground up. For the next 2 weeks, I moved through the house like I wasn't really there. I kept my voice low, my steps quiet, and my reactions controlled. No one noticed the change. Corbin was busy with work. Jace stayed in his room most of the time, and I used their distraction to my advantage. My silence became my shield. I acted like everything was normal, but inside, I was already preparing to leave. One afternoon, when the house was empty, I sat at the dining table with my laptop and opened a new bank account under my own name. I didn't link it to any shared email or phone number. I kept it completely separate, so nothing would show up in notifications. Once it was created, I began moving small amounts of money into it. Only a few dollars at a time, just enough that no one would question it. Every transfer felt like I was taking a tiny piece of my life back. I didn't smile, but I felt a quiet strength growing each time I clicked submit. A few days later, I drove across town pretending I had errands to run. Instead, I went to meet Simone, the divorce attorney I had chosen. The moment she started speaking, I could tell she wasn't someone who backed down easily. She explained what I was entitled to, what steps I needed to take, and what mistakes I couldn't afford to make. At one point, she looked directly at me and said, "The strongest place you can stand is the place where you've already left in your mind. You're not powerless. Not anymore." Hearing that changed something in me. For the first time in years, I felt like someone understood exactly what I was facing and wasn't afraid of it. After that meeting, I began collecting what I needed. I scanned documents, saved copies to a hidden drive, and made sure everything important was backed up. I took pictures of receipts and statements without moving anything out of place. I made lists of what I would take with me, what I needed to close, and what had to wait until the very last moment. Every task was small, but together they formed the path I would walk out on. At home, I acted like the same calm, dependable person I had always been. I cooked, I cleaned, I asked about everyone's day. But I stopped giving pieces of myself away. I didn't argue, didn't complain, didn't try to be seen or appreciated. I didn't need that anymore. I was focused, steady, and completely in control of my own plan. Corbin didn't notice a thing. To him, I was just being my usual self, the quiet woman who never made trouble. But inside, I was already gone. Walking through the house felt different now. I wasn't moving like someone trapped. I was moving like someone preparing to leave on her own terms. By the end of the 2 weeks, everything was ready. The documents, the money, the attorney, the plan. I may have seemed like a ghost in that house, but I finally felt alive again. The morning I chose to leave felt strangely quiet, almost too still, as if the house already knew what was coming. I woke up before anyone else, just like I had for years, and went straight to the kitchen. I cooked a full breakfast: eggs, toast, fruit, coffee. Everything they liked, everything I had made countless times without a second thought. I didn't do it out of love anymore. I did it because I wanted my last morning there to be calm and controlled, not rushed or bitter. It was the final act in a routine I no longer belonged to. When Corbin walked in, he didn't look at me. He grabbed his plate the same way he always did, scrolling through his phone, already wrapped up in his own world. Jace joined him a few minutes later, barely glancing up as he ate. Neither of them said thank you. Neither of them said good morning. But this time, their silence didn't sting. I felt nothing. I had already separated myself from that life in my mind. Watching them act like I didn't exist only confirmed that I was doing the right thing. As soon as they left the house without a backward look, I stood in the doorway and watched the door close behind them. That soft click sounded like the end of a very long chapter. I didn't let myself pause. I went straight to the bedroom and picked up the suitcase I had packed days earlier. It held only the things that were truly mine: clothes I liked, personal documents, a few small items that meant something to me. I didn't take anything out of guilt or anger. I took only what I needed to start over. Before leaving, I walked back into the kitchen. The mug, the one that started everything, sat right on the island. I placed it there on purpose, in the most visible spot in the room. I didn't leave a note or a message. That mug said enough. It could sit there and greet them when they returned, a reminder of the moment they pushed me past my breaking point. I didn't touch it. I simply looked at it once and walked away. Outside, the air felt different, lighter somehow. I put my suitcase in the car, locked the house one final time, and slid into the driver's seat. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I wasn't crying or doubting myself. Instead, I felt a steady calm, the kind that comes when you finally stop waiting for someone else to save you and decide to save yourself. I drove to the airport without looking back. Every mile that passed felt like I was shedding a heavy weight I'd carried for far too long. At the terminal, I checked in for a one-way flight to Seattle, a place far from everything I knew, but full of possibilities. I chose Seattle because it offered work in the field I had once loved, architectural design. A part of me that had been buried was ready to return. When I boarded the plane, I didn't feel fear. I felt free. I wasn't running away. I was finally walking toward a life where I mattered. When my plane touched down in Seattle and I turned on my phone, the messages from Corbin started coming one after another. At first, they were short and confused, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't home. He wrote things like, "Where are you?" and "What's for dinner?" as if my absence was just a small delay in his routine. I didn't reply. I didn't even open them fully. I had left that life behind, and I wasn't going to explain myself to a man who never listened in the first place. As the hours passed with no response from me, his tone changed. His texts grew sharp, accusing, almost desperate to pull me back into his control. "This is incredibly selfish, Alara," he wrote. "You can't just walk out like this." I could almost imagine him pacing the kitchen, irritated that the world wasn't moving according to his schedule. But I stayed silent. I had spent years being available every second, and now I owed him nothing. My silence was the first boundary I had ever drawn. By the next morning, his messages shifted again. The anger faded, replaced by attempts to guilt-trip me. "Jace is upset," he wrote. "Just come home. We can talk." He had never noticed my feelings, but he knew exactly how to tug at my weaknesses. Even then, I didn't give in. I read the texts without emotion. I wasn't returning to a life that kept me small. Instead, I focused on the plan Simone and I had already prepared. She had every document, every detail, every timeline lined up. While Corbin was still trying to pull me back through messages, Simone was moving forward with the next step. She arranged for him to be served at his office, right in front of the people who thought he was a perfect family man. The papers demanded half of everything: the house, the retirement funds, the investments, even his business. Not out of revenge, but because I had earned it through years of unpaid work that made his success possible. When the server walked into his office and handed him the envelope, I knew his world would tilt for the first time. Corbin wasn't used to consequences. He wasn't used to me standing up for myself. For him, this wasn't just paperwork. It was a shock he never expected. His next messages showed it. Instead of anger or guilt, there was disbelief. He wrote things like, "Is this a joke? And you're overreacting." But beneath the words, I could feel the panic. People always believed the calm, confident version of Corbin he showed in public. They saw him as charming and capable. But now he had to face something he couldn't control, and cracks began to show. His calls came nonstop. I didn't answer a single one. He wasn't asking for me. He was asking for his comfort back. While he scrambled, I kept my focus. I met with Simone, reviewed the paperwork, and followed every step she advised. She reminded me that staying steady was the strongest move I could make. And she was right. I didn't need to fight or argue. My absence alone was enough to shake the foundation he had built on my back. The first tremors had started, not for me, but for him. And I wasn't turning around. Seattle felt like a blank page the moment I stepped into the city. Everything was unfamiliar. The air, the traffic, the skyline, but that was exactly what I needed. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking into a house where my voice didn't matter. I wasn't stepping into a role someone else expected me to play. I was starting over with nothing but a suitcase and a quiet determination I hadn't felt in a long time. I found a small apartment on the edge of the city, nothing fancy, but warm and filled with natural light. The windows faced a row of tall trees, and every morning the sunlight filtered through the leaves, filling the rooms with a soft glow. It wasn't big, and it wasn't luxurious, but every corner belonged to me. I could place things where I wanted, cook when I felt like it, and sit in silence without feeling watched or judged. That simple freedom felt like breathing fresh air after being trapped for years. Once I settled in, I knew I had to rebuild my career. I hadn't worked in an office in a long time, but I still remembered the field I once loved, architectural design. I sat at my small dining table, opened my laptop, and started rewriting my resume. At first, I felt unsure, almost embarrassed by the gap in my work history. But I forced myself to look at my years at home differently. I hadn't just been a wife and mother. I had organized schedules, planned budgets, coordinated events, solved problems, and handled countless responsibilities that kept the household running. I turned those duties into professional skills: project coordination, budget management, time planning, logistics, organization. Slowly, the resume started to look like it belonged to someone capable, not someone who had been dismissed as pointless. I sent out dozens of applications. Some companies ignored me, others sent polite rejections, but I didn't stop. Every no stung a little, but not enough to break me. I had faced far worse than an unanswered email. I kept applying, adjusting my resume, writing new cover letters, and reminding myself why I left my old life behind. Then I got a call from a well-known architecture firm downtown. They offered me an interview for an entry-level position. I went there with steady nerves, wearing clothes I had bought from a thrift store, hoping they looked professional enough. The office was sleek and modern, full of people who seemed confident and sharp. Instead of feeling small, I told myself that I belonged there too. During the interview, I stayed honest. I talked about my gap in experience, but I also explained how my years at home had strengthened my ability to manage complicated tasks and stay calm under pressure. I shared how I used to sketch building designs in my free time, even when no one asked me to. The manager listened carefully, and I could tell my sincerity mattered more than anything on paper. A few days later, they offered me the job. Walking into that office on my first day felt like stepping into a new version of myself. I paid attention to everything, learned fast, and worked hard without burning myself out. My boss noticed quickly. He admired my attention to detail and the way I solved problems without fuss. Piece by piece, I was building something solid, a life shaped by my choices, my effort, and my courage to walk away from what tried to shrink me. This time, the foundation was mine. Corbin always cared about appearances more than anything, so I wasn't surprised when he finally took the fight online. One morning, while I was getting ready for work, my phone buzzed nonstop. I didn't check the messages, but curiosity made me open social media. Right there at the top of my feed was a post from him, long, emotional, and completely fake. He wrote as if he were a heartbroken husband desperate for answers. "Ilara, if you see this," he said, "we miss you. Please just come home." We can work this out. He made it sound like I had walked out without reason, like he was confused and hurting. Anyone who didn't know the truth would think he was a loving man whose wife suddenly vanished. Within minutes, his friends and relatives jumped in. They showered him with sympathy, calling him strong, kind, patient. Some added comments about me, saying they hoped I was safe, but hinting that I had acted irresponsibly. A few even suggested that he deserved better. Corbin didn't correct them. He liked every comment, building the image of a man abandoned by an ungrateful wife. Normally, that would have crushed me, but distance gave me a new kind of strength. I watched the whole show without typing a single word. I didn't argue, defend myself, or try to explain the years I had spent quietly holding our life together. I let their misunderstanding grow because I knew something they didn't. Truth has a way of landing harder when it's silent for long enough. For days, I stayed quiet. I focused on work, settled into my new routine, and ignored every attempt to pull me back into his world. Meanwhile, more people shared his post, adding their own opinions. Some said I should stop being dramatic. Others praised him for being so calm during a hard time. They didn't know that calm was his mask, the same mask he wore at home while tearing me down behind closed doors. I watched all of it like someone observing a storm from behind safe glass. I wasn't angry, I was simply done being misunderstood. And I knew the moment would come when I would speak in my own way. It happened one evening after work. I sat on my apartment floor, holding my phone, thinking about how to respond without using a single insulting word. I didn't want a long explanation. I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. So I took one picture. The mug. The same one that had shattered something inside me and pushed me to walk away. I placed it on a table, snapped a clear photo, and wrote one short caption beneath it. My Mother's Day gift. He's right. I was pointless to him. So I found my point elsewhere. I didn't tag Corbin. I didn't mention his name. I didn't comment on his post. I simply shared my truth and let the image speak for itself. Within minutes, people from our old circle saw it. Then they shared it. And slowly, the comments under Corbin's post shifted. Confusion spread. Some people removed their earlier sympathy. Others apologized privately. A few confronted him directly. I didn't reply to anyone. I didn't need to. The truth had finally stepped into the light, and I didn't have to say one word more. Jace's email came late at night, just a few lines, almost like he was afraid someone might read it over his shoulder. He didn't try to defend his father, and he didn't pretend nothing had happened. He simply wrote that things at school had become uncomfortable and that he wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Reading his message felt strange. I had wanted to hear from him for weeks, and now that it was finally happening, I didn't know how to answer. I typed, deleted, and typed again until I settled on something honest but gentle. I told him I was safe, that I wasn't angry with him, and that whenever he felt ready, we could talk. I didn't push him. I didn't ask for more. I just left the door open. While Jace was sorting through his own confusion, everything around Corbin started shifting. People who once praised him now treated him like a man hiding something ugly. The post he thought would protect his image had turned into the spark that lit the fire under him. His "poor me" message suddenly looked shallow compared to the simple truth I had shared. No names. No insults. Just a picture of the one thing that showed exactly how he saw me for years. It spoke louder than anything I could have written. People read it, shared it, whispered about it. And very quickly, the sympathy he had collected began to fall apart. He wasn't prepared for that. Corbin always believed he could talk or charm his way out of anything. But cruelty, once exposed, has a way of sticking. Friends who used to cheer him on stopped commenting. Neighbors who once greeted him now avoided small talk. Even his co-workers, who usually treated him like a leader, began keeping their distance. He hated it, but he couldn't stop it. Every attempt he made to defend himself only made him look worse. The calm silence on my end made his excuses look even louder. And while he was losing control in public, the legal fight was tightening around him. Simone didn't raise her voice or break a sweat. She didn't need to. She had the facts, and Corbin had years of pretending I didn't contribute to our home or his career. She presented everything clearly, from the schedules I kept to the accounts I managed. She showed how much time I had freed for him to work, travel, and grow his business. She revealed how many tasks I took on without complaint, even when he dismissed them as nothing. Piece by piece, she took apart his claim that he built everything alone. By the time she finished, even the judge looked unimpressed with Corbin's version of the story. Watching him lose control wasn't satisfying in the way I once imagined. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't triumph. It just felt like balance returning after years of being tilted. I didn't celebrate. I just stayed steady, answering what I needed to, ignoring the noise, and focusing on the new life I was building. And even with everything happening around him, the thing that shook Corbin the most wasn't the court or the comments online. It was that his own son reached out to me first. 6 months into my new life, I could finally see the results of the hard work I had poured into myself. At the architecture firm, I was given the lead on a major project, something I had only dreamed about during late nights spent sketching quietly on scraps of paper. Every day I arrived with ideas and designs, collaborating with a team that respected my opinions. My confidence grew with each challenge, and when the project launched successfully, my boss praised my attention to detail, creativity, and leadership. The recognition was thrilling, but more importantly, it proved to me that I was capable of more than I had allowed myself to believe. Shortly after, I received a promotion and a bonus that felt like the first real reward I had earned in years. This wasn't about money. It was about finally seeing my effort acknowledged and valued on its own terms. Meanwhile, the divorce process that had started months earlier reached its conclusion. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt calm and grounded. The papers finalized everything. I was awarded half the equity in the house we had shared, a portion of Corbin's retirement funds, investments, and spousal support. None of it felt like a victory over him. It felt like reclaiming what had always been mine, a fair acknowledgement of years I had devoted to supporting a life that hadn't included me as an equal. I left the courtroom without bitterness, only a quiet satisfaction that justice, in its small way, had been done. With the settlement secured, I focused on creating a home that reflected the person I had become. I purchased a modern condo overlooking the water, a place that felt entirely mine. It wasn't just about space or luxury, it was about freedom. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in sunlight and framed the city and water in a way that felt endless. I picked every detail, the colors, the furniture, the layout, even the smallest decorations. It was a home designed for living fully, not just for appearances. For the first time, everything around me matched the life I was building within myself. I still woke up early, but now it was for my own goals, not for anyone else's schedule. My mornings were filled with sunlight, coffee, and quiet reflection instead of obligation and fatigue. Evenings were mine, for reading, designing, or simply looking out at the water and feeling the peace that had been absent from my life for so long. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. My accomplishments, my home, and my career were proof enough that I could thrive on my own. For the first time, I understood what it meant to feel fully in control of my life. I had rebuilt everything, my career, my finances, my home, and my sense of self, from the ground up. The view from my balcony was more than just a city skyline. It was a reminder that I had created a life that no one could take from me. My independence wasn't a gift from anyone. It was the result of every choice I had made and every risk I had dared to take. This was my life, built on my strength, my talent, and my determination, and for the first time, it truly felt like mine. The day Jace arrived in Seattle, I felt a mix of anticipation and caution. I didn't know if he had come to argue, to apologize, or simply to observe. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, taller than I remembered and looking uncertain, I realized how much time had passed and how much we had both changed. I didn't rush him or overwhelm him with questions. I let him step into my space at his own pace. We started with a quiet tour of the apartment. He noticed the sunlight spilling across the living room, the furniture I had carefully chosen, and the little touches I had added to make the space feel like me. I could tell he was impressed, not just by the condo, but by how different my life seemed from the one he had left behind. There was a calm confidence in me that hadn't been there before, and I think seeing it unsettled him. He wasn't used to me standing fully on my own. Later, I invited him to help me cook dinner. It was simple, a favorite recipe I had made countless times. But this time, I cooked for the pleasure of it, not to meet anyone else's expectations. The kitchen smelled warm and familiar, and for the first time in a long time, we were just together without judgment or tension. As we worked, he finally spoke. His voice was low, hesitant, and full of regret. "Mom, I didn't get it. I was just trying to be like him," he said. There was no excuse, only honesty. Hearing him say that made something inside me soften, but I stayed calm, letting him take responsibility for his actions. We ate the meal together, talking quietly about his life, his school, and his confusion over the past months. I didn't lecture him or dwell on the past. I listened. I acknowledged what he was feeling. That simple act, listening without judgment, felt like a bridge between us. When he apologized again, tears in his eyes, I forgave him. Not for his sake, not because he demanded it, but because holding on to anger would only weigh me down. Forgiveness became my way of reclaiming peace and clearing the space for a healthier bond. By the end of the evening, something had shifted. There was no magic fix, no immediate return to the past. Instead, there was respect, understanding, and cautious trust. Jace began to see me as someone capable of strength, independence, and love all at once. And I began to see him as someone learning to navigate his own mistakes, realizing that he didn't have to blindly follow another person to be worthy of connection. That night, as we cleared the dishes together, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Our relationship wasn't rebuilt overnight, but the foundation was solid. Mutual respect and honesty replacing fear and expectation. For the first time, I believed we could have a relationship where both of us mattered equally. It wasn't about undoing the past. It was about building a connection that could endure. And I felt ready for it. A year had passed since I finally walked away from everything that held me back. My life had changed in ways I never thought possible. I was happy, truly happy, and for the first time I felt free. Reese, my boyfriend, was supportive and caring in a way I had never experienced. He respected my decisions, listened without judgment, and encouraged me to chase my dreams. With him, I felt equal, seen, and valued. Work was no longer a source of fear or stress. I had grown my business, made smart investments, and surrounded myself with people who genuinely wanted to see me succeed. Every morning, waking up in my bright, spacious condo reminded me of the distance I had traveled, from feeling trapped and invisible to living a life I could shape on my own terms. The view from my balcony, the city lights, and the quiet evenings with a glass of wine became symbols of my independence. I heard about Corbin through a friend. He was struggling, unable to manage his job or personal life without me. I didn't feel satisfaction from his difficulties. It was simply a reminder of how far I had come. I had left behind all the negativity, the manipulation, and the constant pressure to shrink myself for someone else. He was no longer my concern. My energy was devoted to growth, happiness, and building a life that reflected my worth. Every success, every moment of calm, felt like a quiet victory. I had learned to trust my instincts, to value my own strength, and to recognize that respect starts with oneself. I had turned my pain into fuel, my doubts into determination, and my fears into courage. That evening, I stepped onto the balcony with my glass of wine. The wind brushed against my face as I gazed at the skyline. I raised my glass, not to anyone but myself. I had rewritten my story, created the life I deserved, and discovered the power of self-respect. My past no longer held me captive. I wasn't celebrating anyone's failure. I was celebrating my triumph, my freedom, and the unstoppable person I had become. I realized that true revenge isn't about bringing someone down. It's about rising higher than you ever imagined. And in that moment, I had risen. Do you think I made the right choice by leaving Corbin and starting over, or should I have tried to work things out? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like mine.